All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our Conservation Voices webinar. My name is Anthony Lynham, and I'm the President-elect for the Society for Conservation Biology. And very pleased today to be introducing Dr. Joanna Bagniewska, who is a zoologist and science communicator. Joanna obtained her Master of Science and doctorate from Oxford University's Zoology Department, specializing in behavioral ecology and conservation biology. She then lectured at Nottingham Trent University and the University of Reading. Joanna is passionate about science communication, having won British Council's FameLab Poland and the Wellcome-funded I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here. She's given a TEDx talk, and she's organized popular science conferences and even performed at science stand-up comedy events. She currently splits her time between two roles: senior lecturer in environmental sciences at Brunel University in London, and as a communications and public engagement officer at Oxford University's Department of Pediatrics. So today we thank Joanna and her family for giving us her time to speak in our webinar series. And the title of her talk today is #Career Social Media for Researchers. So social media platforms are increasingly intertwined with work. And in this session, we will cover key principles for using social media effectively and tips on how to optimize your social media presence. While focusing on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn as the most commonly used platforms, the principles are applicable across a broad range of social media apps. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Joanna, and just one or two housekeeping items. Could you please make sure that you have your microphones and cameras turned off during the webinar, and you're welcome to use the chat box to type in your questions for Joanna. And if you have questions that you would like answered during her presentation, she has indicated that she's more than happy to answer questions as they come up. So please put your hand up if you want a question to be answered. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Joanna.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thanks for inviting me. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to, echo what Tony has said, that I'm very happy to be interrupted throughout this talk. So if you have any questions or if anything is unclear, then do signal in the chat or just wave at me using the hand function. We will focus on three social media platforms, so LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and I've asked you to list the social media channels that you use in the chat. And I see that there's quite a bit of overlap, but we also have a few Instagram users. That's fine. I will touch upon Instagram, but the same principles tend to apply when it comes to using various social media platforms. Something to bear in mind is that I will try to make this workshop as interactive as possible with thinking time for you guys. So if you have a pen and a piece of paper, I think it might come in handy. Alternatively, you can always use the device you're on, but it could be a little bit distracting. But every time you see a big fat red arrow, that's a thinking point for you. So this is something you might want to take note of and maybe take on with you later. If not to think about now, then maybe to think about and consider in the future. Okay, when it comes to these three platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, it used to be a tendency that LinkedIn is the professional one, Twitter is the political one, and Facebook is the personal one. But that has very much changed around, and it very much depends on who you are, what you really do, what your background is. Because while LinkedIn does tend to be quite professional, it is absolutely possible to get jobs off Twitter or Facebook, and I'm an example of that. Sometimes people want to use Twitter not necessarily for political activism, but for getting the news or for science communication, for instance. And Facebook started off as a personal platform, but then it really outgrew that purpose. And also, I think many people try to steer away from putting too much personal information on that platform for a number of reasons. But the first big fat red arrow that you will see, so something for you to think about before you start opening a new social media account because you think that it might be useful to have something on Instagram, or it might be useful to have something on Twitter, or before, if you're here to maybe revamp your social media presence, always think about what is your objective. So what is it that you're trying to achieve with this social media activity? And it could be a whole host of things. So with careers in mind, it could be you trying to find a job. You might want to highlight your research because you think that maybe you're not getting enough traction, enough attention, enough citations. Maybe a social media presence could help with that. Maybe you'd like to network or expand your network and you want to find like-minded people. That's another good option. Maybe you feel like you are getting enough traction in the scientific world, but not enough in terms of science communication to a more general audience, and you'd like to meet journalists. Maybe on a similar note, you'd like to do public engagement, and you'd want the social media account to help you with that. Perhaps you might want to be an influencer as kind of a part of your job. This is, you know, an upward trend, and scientists, conservation biologists might fall into that category, especially if they have a lot of very appealing visuals as well when it comes to the work that they do. Or maybe you just like hanging out on social media, and that's perfectly fine too. Maybe this is more of a hobby and you're trying to get an extra bit out of it. So now do take a minute to write it down, and I'll give you pretty much exactly a minute. I've got my phone, so I'll time it here for you, and I'll let you know when that minute is passed. Okay, your minute is up. So hopefully you've jotted down some thoughts about that. It could be more than one objective, obviously. You could potentially diversify your social media as well and think about what is suitable for different types of objectives that you might want to focus on. So with that in mind, I thought it might be nice to go over the different pros and cons and interesting points of each of the social media that I will focus on today. Starting with LinkedIn, when it comes to the commitment, it's relatively low maintenance, so it's more of a one-off sort of exercise. What you do is you put in your online CV onto LinkedIn, and whenever you change a job or whenever you gain a new qualification or gain a particularly great skill or do something fabulous in career terms, you update it, but it definitely doesn't happen every day or every few hours or even several times a week. It's relatively low maintenance, and that's nice. Most of the time you do it once and then come back to it whenever you feel like it. When it comes to your audience has a genuine reason to check you out. So this is good in one sense, because it's probably recruiters, it's probably your potential employers, it's probably maybe your students, or maybe someone who wants to find out what you do professionally, who will click on that profile. So you have a captive audience, otherwise they would not be clicking on you in the first place. So this is good, because you don't need to get too much out of your way to grab them and attract them. When it comes to the usefulness, though, this very, very much depends on the field. So it's great for businesses. It's great for startups. Not so much, I must say, in academia. For NGOs, it could be useful depending on how the NGO is run. It could be good for building a network of like-minded people as well. Things like alumni networks could be also useful. Sometimes if you're looking for jobs, there might be relevant job postings there, though it tends to be very much business focused. So I must say, I don't think I got any very big job offers from LinkedIn. However, my husband, who's a software engineer, gets plenty all the time. Headhunters just are after him. So yeah, it depends on your field. Don't get discouraged if you don't get these offers straight away. It's still, I think, useful to have a LinkedIn account. And something to bear in mind is that in some countries, it's very much a must. So somebody just commented that the US government uses LinkedIn a lot. I actually had Sweden in mind. So in Sweden, you don't really even send CVs. You just send a link to your LinkedIn account, and that's it. This is your online professional presence. And if you're not on it, you're not hireable almost. In the UK, it's fairly useful. In other countries, maybe less so. So something to bear in mind is that it might be worth just setting up an account like that and visiting it periodically, but not spending too much time on it. Who knows, it might come in handy. And if you're applying for a job in Sweden or with the US government, you might find it very useful. The next one is Twitter. When it comes to commitment, if you're trying to build an audience from scratch, it's very big, because you don't really know who your audience could be, because there's no barrier to entry, because everything that you post on Twitter is public unless you put special restrictions in. You could attract anyone. They could be your best friend, or they could be a bot. And you know, sometimes there's no way of verifying. So you need to ask yourself, how much time will you want to spend on it, and who do you want to attract to your account, because that will direct what sort of commitment you will get yourself into. When it comes to the usefulness, again, it depends on the field and it depends on your goal. So it can be very useful for science communication. It can be useful in academia. Academics, I find, tend to use Twitter on a daily basis more than they would use LinkedIn. And it's nice for accessing the latest information. A lot of people, when they publish a paper, will shout about it using Twitter. If there's anything happening in the world, you can check out the Twitter trends and you can follow them. So it does come in handy in that way. Somebody made a good point about ResearchGate, and ResearchGate is better than LinkedIn for academia. That's true. Yeah, I don't think many recruiters use ResearchGate. So again, this very much depends on what sort of goals you're after. So if you want to share your publications, yeah, ResearchGate can definitely be useful. If you're more after being hired, then maybe LinkedIn could be there. Something to note is that Twitter tends to be very good for conferences, and if you don't have a Twitter account, it might be very overwhelming because all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of an ocean of voices that just scream at you. But if you use hashtags and if there's an event that's going on, it gives you a nice opportunity to have a talk parallel to what's going on in the conference room, in the conference hall, or in the remote conference that you're taking part in. So if you want to ask the speaker a direct question that you didn't have time to ask during the Q&A session, or if you want to comment on how great the talk was, or say that you totally disagree with them and give counter examples, then this is a nice opportunity to do that, because it provides that extra dimension to it. And something to bear in mind is that tweeting does actually improve citations, and this is a paper that was published very recently, and this comes from biomedical sciences, but there's quite a few papers that do show that that if you tweet about your articles, it does improve citations. It's not a guarantee, of course. It's not a given, but if you think about it, academics are people too, and they will also use the same media outlets that anyone else does, and of course, Twitter is one of them. So if they follow a lot of people in the same discipline, and these people tweet about their latest findings, then of course there is a higher chance that these papers will be picked up on and then cited. And there's also a different sort of dimension. So some of you might have heard a couple of years ago, there was a story that kind of broke the internet. Maybe some of you have taken part in using the fieldwork fail hashtag. So a friend of mine, Agata Staniewicz, broke Twitter by tweeting that she accidentally glued herself to a crocodile while attaching a radio transmitter, and she used the hashtag fieldwork fail, which was very much picked up on by other field biologists, conservationists, geographers, anyone who works in the field, and there was this whole trend that was picked up by mainstream media, and there were articles written about it because it was absolutely hilarious. And in fact, it reached such proportions that a book was written about it, using the examples of all these stories from the field. And here's an illustration. Agata doesn't look that much like it, but it's close enough. It's a nice cartoon, and yeah, there she is as part of that book. So it does provide a very wide reach if what you tweet happens to fall within that range of interest. Okay. The next one is Facebook, and here the question is, will you use Facebook as a Facebook profile, or will you use Facebook as a fan page? Because the approaches are slightly different. For a profile, it's a bit like a LinkedIn profile, and for a fan page, it's more like a Twitter account. So when it comes to commitment with a profile, the idea is in line with Facebook's initial founding mission, let's say, which is to get all your friends to be connected to you, and the idea was to keep it quite personal. So the commitment was quite low. You add someone as a friend and that's it. And you don't need to post, you don't need to do anything. You kind of sit there in this network and nothing happens. You can post if you want, but you don't have to. Whereas with a fan page, if you're either representing yourself or you're representing an organization, then you have to attract an audience that's not necessarily just your friends and acquaintances, it's anyone around the world. So the commitment, again, is very high, like with Twitter. So you have to think about who it is that you might want to attract, what sort of content they will find attractive, and you have to put in all that legwork. So here again, the audiences are very different. So with a profile, with a Facebook profile, it's people that you met in real life or people you've had some sort of an interaction with before. They're not usually complete strangers. And if you're running a fan page, they will be completely random. They might like your fan page because you post interesting pictures or you have fun facts about animals or whatever. That will be their hook. That's what attracts them. And usefulness, again, and you've heard me say that, depends on the field. I find that it's very good for live events, for streaming, especially these days. It's great that so many organizations are able to host talks that are streamed straight from Zoom onto Facebook or YouTube or both. It's also very advantageous if you have a strong network. So if you have a profile and the people around you, the people in your network are genuinely useful and they're your friends and they have some interest in helping you, because that means that since they're not anonymous, since you're not anonymous, you can reach out for them, ask for advice, ask for a bit of mentoring, etc. Chris says that you use Facebook for posting signs to interest groups. Yeah, and it can have much more impact than just having a page you post to. That's definitely true. Yeah, it's good because when you have a Facebook profile, your brand is who you are. And so if you say, I, as a zoologist, recommend this article, you should check it out, then people are more likely to read it because they believe you have the credibility of an expert, and so it is a more powerful message than coming from a complete randomer. So it does come in handy in that way. Now, something to bear in mind is that whole privacy thing. And so Facebook has not been doing super well on the privacy front. There have been data breaches. The latest one, I think, happened last week with a lot of phone numbers being leaked. So something to bear in mind is how much personal information you put there, what you might want to put there. So I would refrain from, for instance, posting pictures of children or posting pictures in front of the house that you live in, which shows a very clear address, because you just never know who's going to get to that sort of data. And I would be quite careful. So with this is where the trickiness comes in, because with Twitter, what you see is what you get. It's pretty obvious that everything you post on it is very much public. People forget about it, but you know, this is what they signed up for in the first place. With LinkedIn, you probably would post only professional information that could be found on other websites like your university or your company website. And so it's quite professional, and you're unlikely to post pictures of your drunken night in a pub or your baby on the potty or something like that. It's, you know, you're keeping it professional. But Facebook, with this gray area of personal mixed in with professional, leads to a lot of awkwardness in that respect. So I would say keep it more professional and try to think about what long-term consequences your post might have. So try not to breach other people's privacy, even if the other people are only a few years old. Okay, we're coming up to the next big red arrow, which is who is your audience? So have a think about whether maybe they're recruiters or employers. Are they academics in your field? Are they the general public? And I hate the term general public because public is never general. It's always people with faces, with interests, with names. So if you're thinking about reaching a wider audience, think exactly who it is that you're trying to reach. Are you trying to reach your partner? Are you trying to reach your grandma? Are you trying to reach the shopkeeper across the road? Are you trying to reach the person who sells you tickets for a train, who is it? Who have a face to that general public crowd, okay? Because when you have a clearer picture of your audience, you will have an idea of how you might attract them. What will they find interesting? So if it's recruiters or employers, they will be interested in your skills and what you have done. If it's academics, they will be interested in your work. But if it's just general public, well, you know, if you post funny pictures of cats, that might be it. Or if you post gross animal facts, that might be it. Or you might want to specialize in something else, but think about who it is and what you might want from them. Also think about where they are. And this is especially important if you're posting something like a poll, or you're organizing a live stream, or you want some sort of an interaction in real time. Because, so let's say if you're in IT or doing something relevant to computers, you know that most of the interest will come from the American West Coast. And so if you live in the UK, there's not much point in posting something in the morning of British summertime, because nobody in California will be awake at that moment. So think about where your audience might be geographically and when their peak activity would be. And also there are some cultural subtleties to do with that, but I mean, I'll leave this down to you, because you will come from different parts of the world and speak different languages and know more about your audiences than I do. But another red arrow is, what do you want your audience to do? So do you want them to give you a job? Do you want them to be impressed by your amazing research? Do you want them to support a campaign? Do you want them to be interested in a particular species or a particular project? What is it? Do you want to pull at their heartstrings? What is the follow-up activity from that audience? Are you happy with them going, oh, this was an interesting fact, I'll try to remember this for the next 5 minutes? Or do you want them to, I don't know, make a donation, or do you want them to join your team? So have a think about that, what it is that your posts will change in their behavior. Okay. With that in mind, think about building that audience. So to start off with, does that audience have an interest in you? So in LinkedIn, they will, in Twitter, not so much. Why should they follow you? And the cheeky way of doing this is think about something that's least relevant or interesting for you. What would make you follow it? So this is something that you'll need to consider when you're working with the general public. There must be some areas, some disciplines that you have literally no interest in, or very little interest in. And if somebody is ramming that topic down your throat, you probably are not really appreciative of it. So bear in mind, of course, we all love our field and it's super interesting, but it might not be the case for everyone else. So they might think, oh God, another person talking about tiger poo, really? This, you weirdos. So they might need a bit of coaxing, a bit of convincing. Something that I think has been doing this phenomenally well, an institution that has been doing it brilliantly, is the Museum of English Rural Life. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't have that much of an interest in English rural life. I think of sheep and hills, and that's a little bit dull. But the Museum of English Rural Life has 157,000 followers, and probably more now because I've taken this screenshot a few weeks back. And this is a pretty good number for a very small museum in Reading in UK. And this is largely because of their incredible social media presence. They were brilliant at figuring out these amazing museum Twitter wars, which were then picked up by mainstream media. With headlines like "Museums post their best duck pictures and greatest Twitter battle ever," because the Merle, so Museum of English Rural Life, would tag the Louvre and be like, "Here's our duck, show us yours," and museums would chip in with pictures of their ducks or videos of their duck-related artifacts, and it was crazy. It just blew completely out of proportions. Or at some point, they had a massive Twitter exchange with Elon Musk. And you can look it up. It made the media, made the headlines as well, with them flipping names to be Elon Musk, and Elon Musk changed his name to Merle. And in fact, the man in charge of that Twitter account, who's now at Royal Academy, after that stint, he was hired by Tesla to run their Twitter account, and he did that for some time. So he's now at Royal Academy. So if you want to see how engagement works in practice, and building up an audience from scratch, because I think when he started, it was something like maybe 30,000 or so followers, and he really bulked it to 120 or so thousand. So it's a huge impact that he has had. Then look him up at the Royal Academy, or look up his personal Twitter account. He picks up the trends on Twitter spot on, and he's excellent engaging different audiences. It's absolutely brilliant. Okay, big red arrow coming up, and that is, what are your key messages? So think about what it is that you want to focus on in your particular social media channels. So your key messages could be something like, I'm a well-educated person, I have relevant experience, and I'm looking for work. And that's a very clear message for a recruiter. Or I'm a researcher in field A and I focus on topic B. And then people who read that Twitter account of yours, or see your Facebook page, will know more or less what to expect. Or I will tell you why XYZ is the most interesting thing on earth. And this is more of a science communication spin on things. But think about what it is that you want to present. Because that is a good way of managing the audience's expectation. So the audience is following your fan page or following your Twitter account because they're expecting some sort of, they liked a bit of content at some point and they expect to see that sort of content again. And if it's a one-off, they might as well unfollow you if they think that you're boring. So try to manage the expectations. And this is one of those things where I should say, do what I say, not what I do, because I am not great at keeping to very few, very precise key messages. That is largely to the sort of person I am and the sort of jobs I do. But I'm a zoologist and a science communicator. I'm an academic, but I'm also part of the administrative team as a science communicator. I tweet in English and I tweet in Polish because that's my native language. I do some journalist work and I do communicate with journalists via Twitter. I will tweet about zoology stuff, but also Polish people abroad because this is something that is very close to my heart. I will tweet about internet security, and now I will also tweet about vaccines because pediatrics in Oxford, where I work, is part of is home to the Oxford Vaccine Group. So when you follow me on Twitter, you will notice a great range of topics, and I try to limit that range, but I fail, I must tell you. So don't be like me. Keep it focused. The next big red arrow is, what are your resources? And the biggest one, I think, is how much time are you willing to spend on this? So are you trying to build an audience from scratch, and are you trying to be the next big Twitter or Instagram influencer, or do you just want to tweet whenever you've got a new paper out? What is it? Will you be on your own, or will you have someone to help? And this is a question for people who might want to run institutional accounts. It's always easier when you're not on your own, if you share the workload with someone. Something important is, how will you know that you have succeeded? So if you take your audience and you take the behavior that you want to evoke in your audience, how will you know that you have achieved your goal? What is your evaluation? And this is something that people don't really think about, because you can say, okay, my goal is to fundraise for my conservation project. And I'm giving myself 3 months, and I will try to do some very intensive tweeting throughout these 3 months. I will tweet every day, at least once a day, and this is my schedule, and I will engage all of these people, and I'm hoping that my audience will be built up from this number to this number, and I'm hoping then that will translate into donations to the project. So think about, what is your cutoff point? When will you think, okay, this is not worth my time, it's just too much effort, and I could use these resources somewhere else, just for your own sanity, okay? Because you have to always ask yourself, is it worth your time? Or maybe, you know, if you're getting some traction but not as much as you wanted, then you just scale it down and focus on other, say, fundraising opportunities. Side remark for you, something that you might hear, I hear that a lot, is, can't we just start a departmental or group or institute Twitter account? And it's the can't we just start that makes my head go like the Lego man there. Because what people don't think about is how much work goes into building a social media account from scratch if you want to have good traction. I think a lot of, especially older PIs, assume that if you just start a Twitter account and tweet every once in a while, like once a month, that's going to be enough, and there will be 1 million people following you within 3 days, and you will live happily ever after, and your public engagement box on your grant application will be ticked, and it's amazing. But that's not how it works. So I would say, if you're in a situation where somebody else is telling you, can we just start an institute Twitter account, see what else is available to you, because maybe there's something above you. So if you're in a research group, maybe there's a departmental Twitter account, or if you're in a department, maybe there's a divisional Twitter account that you might be part of. And normally people in charge of these social media accounts are super happy when you provide them with content. So they're really, really pleased when somebody says, hey, look, could you tweet about my latest paper, or this grant that we got, or this project that we're doing? Because it makes their jobs easier, right? Of course, they don't need to think about the few more tweets that they will have to produce themselves otherwise. Again, think about your audience here. Hand on heart, who do you think would follow your research group's Twitter account? And think about it this way. If a similar institute was somewhere else on Twitter, would you follow it or not? First of all, how would you find out about them? Secondly, would you follow them? And if so, why? Is it just to scout out competition, or because they're genuinely interesting? And you know, if it's a similar institute, at least it's something from your own field that could be of relevance or interest. But if it's from a completely different field, then you're not that likely to get a lot of traction. But something that is useful in terms of these group or departmental Twitter accounts is internal communications. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive, because you're shouting about something from the rooftops via Twitter, via something that's publicly accessible to the entire world. But really, the people who are likely to follow that particular social media account are probably people affiliated with that institute anyway. So so it's a good way of keeping the institutional alumni informed of the papers that have been published or the grants that have been obtained or the successes or getting their opinions. So in that way, it could be useful and meaningful if you can keep their engagement up, but it might not fulfill the function of public engagement if this is something that you're after. Okay, so some general tips. First of all, think about, why am I posting this? Is it useful? Is it kind? Is it nice? Is it intelligent? Am I just venting here? Is it really good? Try to stay focused. So don't look at my Twitter account for examples of this, but yeah, try to stay focused on your key messages. Don't vent, don't rant, and don't offend, because that's not helpful and it creates a very bad look for you. I mean, sometimes, you know, if you really lose it and it happens once, we're all people, but don't make it a regular thing. It comes off as really negative. But do listen and do broadcast and do respond. So see what other people are tweeting about and try to amplify it if you agree with them, because they might reciprocate by retweeting your tweets later. And try to respond to tweets. Be an engaged listening user, and that will build you, I think, a more engaged audience to start with. Try to remember that tweets with media, so pictures and videos and GIFs, get more traction than just text. And make use of any sort of topical days or hashtags. So one example is Inktober, and that's for October. There are different themes for each day, and people who are artists will make a little doodle or drawing or some other piece of art on that theme. And it's a lovely thing to look at, especially if you have artsy friends. It's always amazing. I'm always looking forward to that month. But something like Museum Week, if you're affiliated with a museum, there again would be themes for each day of that week, and you can use this as an opportunity to show off the exhibits that you have. There will be trends like I don't know, World Pangolin Day or World Bird Day or some other days. It's not that difficult to find a list of all of these days and just follow the relevant ones to you and use these to broadcast, because they will be trending on Twitter. And try to create your own social media policy. Now, what do I mean by that? So for example, only post things that you would be happy with a few days later. So have a think and have a calm down before you post something. Focus on your key messages and not on politics. Although if focusing on politics is part of your job, then of course focus on politics. I would not tell a political scientist not to focus on politics, but if you're using an institutional account to rant about election results or something like that, it doesn't come off as very professional and it could alienate a lot of audiences. Try not to post anything inflammatory unless you're doing it deliberately to start a bit of to grab a lot of attention, because it will grab a lot of attention, but maybe not in the best of ways. Try not to respond to trolls, because, you know, our nerves are not always made of steel, and sometimes you just need to chill out, and these long discussions usually lead to nowhere. And act as if your boss is watching. Now, these are just examples of my own social media policy, but you could have something that's completely different. You might say, okay, I give the trolls one shot, so I will respond once and then never again, or something, you know, but make it something that's suitable for you. But I brought up the last one, act as if your boss is watching, because this is something that's actually happened to me. So I went for a job interview at the University of Reading, and literally as I was leaving the interview room, there was a ping on my phone, and I got a notification that Amanda Callahan now follows me, who then became my future boss. And of course, the first thing you need to think about is, oh my goodness, what did I post on Twitter in the last few weeks? Because this is what she's likely going to see. Thankfully, it was not anything bad, inflammatory, aggressive, whiny, ranty, anything like that. It was just pictures of seals, which is fine. But it did give me a bit of an uneasy feeling. So bear in mind that everyone can see your Twitter account. And generally people do follow you on social media. They might not do so openly, like thankfully Amanda did in my case, but they will check you out. And I would like to finish on one last quote from William Shakespeare, which is, "To thine own self be true." So don't pretend to be someone that you're not. Try to be yourself, maybe a slightly more outgoing or funny version of yourself, but yeah, stick true to yourself and enjoy. And if you have any questions, I would be super happy to answer them now. We have about 13 minutes for them. Oh, you're very welcome. And I suppose one thing to bear in mind, if you're working with animals a lot and you're posting on Instagram or some other social media channels that are very visual, then be quite careful about when it comes to the pictures that you post. So anything like anesthetized animals, make sure you have a very complete description of what it is that you show on that picture, because these pictures could be taken out of context and it could be used against you. So just be very wary if you're doing any work with animals that is hands-on. Make sure that it's not misconstrued, because there are a lot of people who are not afraid of doing not very nice things with your images. When it comes to fitting your message in the limited character count, I think it's 240 now, but it's still not very long. With non-native English speakers, if you're running an institutional account, I would say try to share this this duty with someone else who is a native English speaker, just so that they at least, you know, check your spelling or check your grammar, or can make the message a bit more concise. That does come in handy. If it's your own personal one, then I think people are a bit more forgiving, because you're not the face of an official sort of organization. But yeah, I agree, it's not easy. And if you feel that you've got a lot to say on a topic and you'd rather post little stories and anecdotes about a species or a project, then maybe you should try and pick a different social medium. Maybe a Facebook fan page would be more appropriate. Or if you really can't fit your message, you can always do threads. So have tweets under tweets under tweets under tweets. Or you could write it up in Notepad or somewhere else and do a screenshot and post that as a picture. So that could work. Then, of course, if you do that, if you present any pictures with text, make sure that your text description also reflects what that picture says. Otherwise, people who are visually impaired and are using screen readers won't be able to access that text. So something to bear in mind. With Instagram, yeah, apart from being careful on on the visuals, you can use Instagram stories quite efficiently if you have a bit of a captive audience. I would say if you're working with animals, just be careful what you post. That would be my biggest advice. But I don't have that much experience on Instagram. It was quite a conscious decision on my part not to get an Instagram account, because there's only limited time in the day that a person might have. So I don't think I'm the best person to ask. When it comes to animal ethics, when posting on social media, also, so apart from the visual side of things, try to be careful about the language that you use. So maybe if you're working with small mammals, rather than writing small mammal trapping in the site, write small mammal surveying, which means the same thing, but it's much more palatable to someone who doesn't know what the process actually entails. Try to be as honest as possible, but at the same time, if you feel that your work could be controversial in any way, then maybe don't give the precise geographical locations where you could be found, or where your camera traps are, or where your small mammal traps are, because you never know what people are out there and what people might actually be out there to sabotage your research. So I'm saying this sounding like a completely paranoid person, but I just would prefer to err on the side of caution than get into trouble. I think there's a question from Michael: how long does it typically take to build a solid Twitter following when investing reasonable effort? So it is very context dependent, but I think it depends what sort of audience are you looking for. So you can literally just go and post all the funniest pictures of cats, and then that will probably get you a lot of followers, because cats are cute and funny. But it's not an audience that is a captive, engaged audience that you're really trying to target. So it's difficult to say. It depends, again, what you're trying to get out of this audience. Are they academics in your field? And then you'll have to target someone more specifically. You'll have to respond to their tweets, show them that you're, worth following. Or if it's just a matter of throwing all your memes in the direction of a person. Yeah. Oh, what's my opinion on tweeting plain jokes or about personal matters to gain followers? I think it's fine. I think a lot of scientists in movies and general media are presented as these heartless robots that don't have a personal life and don't, they're just there in their labs and that's it. They don't have a sort of human face. But I think it's nice to show a more personal side. I think that's perfectly fine. Again, depends what it is that you're after. And it's I'm always a big fan of jokes. Maybe not as the only content, but if you plan it out, if you think about, okay, on Mondays I'll post an interesting fact from the New Scientist that I've read recently. On Tuesday I will point to some of the research I'm doing. On Wednesday I'll quote a joke about animals. On Thursday, I'll retweet what somebody else has done, and on Friday, I'll have a day off, or I don't know, whatever else, or I'll post a photo of something. Then that gives you a lot of variety, and it doesn't limit your activity just to the jokes and memes. But you're still sticking with the general subject of, I don't know, hyena research or hedgehog research, but you're doing that in a diverse array of topics. Oh, thanks, Marcus, for for that link. I think that's really cool. With a paper on the number of followers, that's a good number. Yeah, I think 800 is if they're an engaged audience, I think this is someone, like, it's a nice audience to be able to work with. So it's brilliant. And I do apologize for the light. For some reason, the whole room is very white. The sky above me is white, and the sky on my left is white. So I feel like a ghost here, almost.
There's a question from Astrid.
A question from Astrid. Advice on the option of using Facebook for project updates. I think keeping posts closed for comments when it comes to updates, that's an interesting one. So are these comments obstructive? Are they offensive, or are they just curious people wanting to know more? Because there's a difference here. So let's say if you look at very big institutions, like if you look at Oxford University, they will get a lot of comments that are totally not relevant to a post. They will say, you know, come and click on this page, or I don't know, support my charity, or something in a different language that has nothing to do with anything, just, you know, very, very spammy sort of posts. And they tend to just ignore these because it's very obvious that these are not relevant comments. So you've got people who don't agree with their conservation, and they're but are they offensive, or are they just politely disagreeing? Because there's also a difference. So will they say, your work is terrible and you should not do it? Or will they say, oh, but have you considered the fact that as a farmer, I'm trying to protect my livestock, and your work is getting in my way? Because there are other ways of tackling it. So you can say at the top of your fan page, we do not tolerate offensive comments, and just delete these. You can say, we appreciate that not all of you may agree with the research that we're doing, and we'll try to address these concerns periodically. Like every month you can have a Q&A for difficult audiences. I would say when dealing with people who have very strong opinions that are different to yours, difficult as it sounds, but try to be respectful and try to listen to them, and think about the common values that you might have. I appreciate that, yeah, you might not have time to get into long discussions on Facebook comments, but you could maybe offer a Facebook Live once a month and say, we've picked out these comments that you guys have written in the last month, and we'd like to address these. I think it's important that we have a discussion, and then your organization would be seen as this more dialogue-oriented sort of association. I've been working with vaccine hesitant groups as part of my job, and it's always interesting because there will be people that you will never be able to convince, no matter what you say. There will be people who want to find out more. They have concerns at the moment, but that's because they're not sure about a number of things. There are people who are hesitant because they fundamentally don't know how vaccines work. And I think that's fine. Not everybody has to know that. And so maybe try to suss out what sort of groups these people fall into. And bear in mind, you will not be able to convince some of them, and it's fine. It's just, you know, you're not there to please absolutely everyone. So yeah, you can always say, you know, thank you for your comments. We will try to address them at the end of the month where we do this Q&A. I think I would do that, especially if these comments tend to repeat themselves regularly. Or even if it's not once a month, you can have a post that is pinned at the top saying, I'm a farmer, I hate wolves, why do you do this research? And you provide an answers to that. And it's there for everybody to see. Maybe that preempts some of these questions. Oh, any advice on conveying a serious topic to influence, inspire behavioral change in the audience? So for instance, climate change. I think a good way of doing things is to not overwhelm people with the negative. And it's hard because as conservationists, we're trying to save the world and we know how dire a state the world is in, and it sucks. But at the same time, most people are hoping that we are trying to solve the problems. And if we're saying, oh, no, we're doomed, then they feel just demotivated. So something which I think is really good is a project called Conservation Optimism. And it's highlighting the positive case studies, solutions-based case studies for conservation. And I think this is the right approach because people want to have a good story, something that they can look up to, some example of something that works, a simple action that they can do. So always have some sort of a call to action, which is not overwhelmingly difficult. Don't try to guilt trip people into doing something because that's not a nice feeling to leave your audience with. But just say, look, if you could do one thing to combat climate change, then maybe have a meat-free Monday. You know, it's a small thing, just have, you know, a vegan pizza instead. And you can give them a recipe. And this is just one teeny little thing, but try to keep it positive and try to keep it solutions oriented. And sometimes it's difficult, but I think that's the best approach. I think I've answered all my questions. Tony, have I missed anything?
I think you've answered them all, Joanna. Well done. There was a lot of questions for you, and
they're really good questions.
Good questions. Well, thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar this morning. We hope you've enjoyed it, and Joanna, thank you very much for your time. It was a really excellent presentation, and I think that we've learned a lot. So hopefully we'll be able to take the tips that you've provided us and bring them into our daily and professional lives in using social media.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Joanna. And yes, I think we'll wrap it up now, and we'll yes. So thank you very much to all the members of SCB for joining us, and members of the conservation community. And thank you for our organizers in the United States for getting up early to present, to open the session. And great. We'll see you again next time. So goodbye for now.
Bye.
Thanks very much.